one? This one?
Whichever one, that one normally.
This one. Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome to our latest CarpFix Live. The main purpose of these live feeds is to answer you, the members' questions. So while we have a little rabble on, think anything that you'd like to know regarding carp fishing, anything about recent sessions, the waters you're fishing, rigs, baits, time of year, our recent films, anything carp fishing related really. So get those in, and whilst you're doing that, getting your questions in, I'll just have a little chat about what I've been up to in recent weeks. Now, I've been out filming a couple of times for CarpFix. The first time we went to Stanwick Lakes, which is up near Ash, our cameraman's sort of area where he lives. His wife is expecting very, very soon, so we needed to be close in case he needed to make a dash. Now, I've never been to Stanwick before, and went there sort of on sort of Ash's advice really. It's quite a nice, mature complex, loads of lakes there. Really, really sort of carpy looking lakes. There's something for everyone, for all levels of carp fishing. Every lake that we walked around had fish on the surface. A lot of people there. It was quite busy. Now, on the first night we arrived, we set up in a swim with fish cruising around all out in front. It's about 6-7 foot deep out there, and I decided for the first night, rather than try and bait them, I thought I'd just go out with Zigs. I thought it was sort of a real sort of light way to not bomb the swim up, not scare them off. Now, the surface was covered in that May fluff, absolutely covered in it, and you could just sort of see them pushing around with their backs out. At the opposite end of the lake, Lee Morris was filming underwater for Fox. I think he had a couple, but other than that, it wasn't. I don't think there was anything out. I don't think he caught anything while we were there, but he had caught before we got there. But yeah, that first night passed by quietly. Not a lot really happened. There was a move on in the morning to swim a few fish in front of it, but because I'd seen, when we'd done the first lap on the first day, I'd seen so many sort of stalking opportunities, I thought it would be sort of rude not to take advantage of that. So we went stalking on, I think it's called Mallard Lake, the one next to where we started, and there's this like hole in the bush swim where you can sort of go into the trees. You could see this fish coming in and out. It was like an absolute dead cert. It was really tricky to sort of get the rig in position because they were sort of so many fish there. They just weren't leaving the spot long enough to get the rig in. But I did manage to get it in sort of fairly stealthily. Put a handful of bait round it, probably only 2 foot deep, something like that. Sat down, ate my lunch, and within 5 minutes the rod belted off, and I lost it. I had it on for, I don't know, maybe a few minutes maximum. Played it quite heavy at the start, which is potentially why I lost it, maybe. But yeah, unfortunately it fell off. Now, after that, we thought we'd go back to the lake that we'd originally started on. But what had happened in the time we'd been stalking, quite a few more people had arrived, and the area where we'd seen them before we moved there wasn't people round there, but there was people casting across there. So it would have meant getting into a bit of a conversation with asking people to move rods, which I wasn't really comfortable doing. So I made a call to the guys at Embryo Angling, said I'm sort of in the Peterborough area. Have you got anywhere we could potentially go and make a film? And a couple of options. One would be Pump House, and one would be Embryo Angling's Serpentine Lake. Now, I'd fished Serpentine Lake. I say fished it. I fished it myself once, but I'd been there twice. I've been there once on a charity do when Dan very, very first opened it. Sort of was guiding 2 people that had paid to be in the charity event, and caught some fish. It was like when it very first opened, and then I went back and done a technical video with Ash. I was trying the long shanked beat points. Now I did catch one on that session, and I did lose one, and I sort of, I don't know, and it felt like it owed me one. So when I heard that there was nobody there, that the lake was changing from, it's a syndicate, it has been a syndicate since it opened, it's changing to a day ticket alongside the shallow next to it. I thought it was a perfect time to go and make a film there. Very, very quiet, no one around. The main bowl that you come to has got a couple of quite nice features in it and quite a bit of weed. And the fish were at that end of the lake when we arrived. First of all, on the surface, really high in the water, and I decided because they were high to fish down the margins with pop-ups. Now, in hindsight, that was a mistake. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. But in the morning, they'd moved out of the shallow margins and gone out into open water around the weed and were jumping around there. And if we'd been on the spot that we ended up getting onto, I'm sure we'd have caught that first night. But had to move, went into a swim that sort of all overgrown. You could see no one had been in there for ages. Plumbed up a really nice sort of clean bit amongst quite thick weed. Spommed it up, sat down, and pretty quickly things started happening. I think we had 5 to 33 pound, lovely common. And we were just waiting for a fish to close out the film. Had to take and then lost it in the reeds. It was like barbless hooks. It kited, felt like an all right fish, not necessarily massive, but kited round in a tight line and got into the reeds and come off, unfortunately, which was a bit of a bummer to sign out on that. But yeah, that film's already been out, sort of showing Stanwick, and then the move to the first half of the move to what's it called again? Serpentine Lake, and then obviously part 2 of that's coming soon.
Next Friday.
Next Friday.
Yeah.
When
I'm just currently editing it.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about, I'm watching it as I.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got fun.
You had to work for them, didn't you? You had to work hard.
You had to work hard until we got it right.
Yeah.
Basically, when you go to lakes that you don't know, you know nothing about, you are winging it. And it's quite difficult to hit the floor running with your first choice, your swim choice. Spot choice, all of those things, like they make or break your session. And when you don't know exactly what's right, it's quite easy to make mistakes. But once we did get the move on and got into the right peg, found a nice spot. I can't remember how far out. I think it was about 12 wraps, so lovely short range. And when it's thick weed and you find a nice clear spot in amongst it, that's it almost like in a process of elimination. If it's all weedy and you've got one really nice clear spot, you know that they're going to come to that if you put some bait on it.
Yeah.
And because it's been real quiet, because it's sort of in that transition period between changing from a syndicate to a day ticket lake, they haven't been overfished. They're not like under immense pressure, which pressure is the thing that makes carp hardest to catch. People lines in the water and whatnot. So there was one other person on the lake during our session, but they were right up the other end, out the way.
Did they catch? Or do you know?
I don't know. But they was like one person was in that swim and then they changed, someone else went in that swim. But we had the whole main bowl to ourselves. So no one was like, there weren't leads landing around us.
Yeah.
And like that can ruin your session, as in like
yeah.
you can be having them.
Yeah.
So you catch a couple, a few leads come flying in, and then that's affected your next part of your session where you might be getting more bites. So I enjoyed that. And then the following week, we went to Embryo Angling's Pump House Lake, again, a venue that I've never fished myself. I know we've filmed there a couple of times. Luke Valerie's made a film there. Rob Berg made a film there for us. So yeah, it was nice to go there and see it. It's a typical Peterborough brick pit in that there are quite a few bricks in there, clay bottom. It's got that unique brick house in it though, which is quite a mad.
What swim did you fish?
Both of the ones around the pump house. So starting on the one that everyone fishes.
Yeah.
We've started in there and caught a couple from there.
Yeah.
But we're fishing quite far out, and the mallards were just insanity.
Yeah.
Just like once they found the bait, I caught a couple quick, one or two. I can't remember quite quickly, and then the mallards came in and I just couldn't keep my rigs in the water. It was just like So what I did, I baited that spot heavy, the one that the birds were on, and then moved somewhere else. Because I kept keeping the birds, knowing that now they
keep them occupied.
So we moved onto a spot fairly close by in the same area where we thought the fish were. Shorter range, and when it's shorter range, it's easy to keep the birds off of you.
Yeah.
If you're fishing far out, then they don't pay attention to you. But if you're only like 10, 12, 14 wraps away from them, they're a bit more nervous, aren't they? So we moved around there, caught some fish as well. Nothing really big. Certainly didn't have it away, but caught a few fish, a couple of pretty ones, and
it's cool. It's a different kind of vibe, that place. It's like obviously it's surrounded by those industrial units, but then you've got like a beautiful reed lined lake.
Yeah, it's
very strange.
Yeah, it's quite a cool lake. Cool lake.
Some nice fish in it.
Nice fish in there. Didn't really get amongst the better ones on that trip, but like having been there now, I'd like to go there again at a later time in the year. I think for some reason it just felt like the sort of lake you want to be there in October.
Yeah.
like I can imagine them being around that brick house.
Yeah.
So it's like a telephone shape, as in like an old school telephone. You've got a thinner bit through the middle and two sort of bowls on the end.
Yeah.
And sort of the inner side of the telephone is shallow along that reed line, and then it drops down deeper in front of the swims. You've got 3 or 4 swims in a row, and it's like deeper in the middle, and then coming up shallow opposite.
Yeah.
So they're either going to be in that deep part there, or they're going to be around that pump house. And I would bet that most of the time they're around that pump house.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't think you're really going to have to go looking for them.
They're probably sat in it.
Me and Ash were having that conversation.
Yeah, they're probably just sat looking out the window.
Has it got a door? Has it got a window? They're getting in there.
Yeah,
no way the door.
No, they're in. They're in there.
Inside,
Yeah.
Right. I guess you've not been fishing.
I've been editing. Your film.
Yeah.
And I've been editing the set part 2 as well.
Yeah.
So I've not done anything apart from that really, to be honest. I have planned.
Little session.
No. I've planned in a couple of weeks to go and see Derek.
How have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to try and do 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
On 2 different venues.
Yeah.
Because last time I went to see him,
you had to bail out, didn't you?
I had to bail out because of Isla.
Yeah.
And we kind of got unfinished business. So we potentially are going to go to his syndicate, one of his syndicates.
Yeah.
And then we might. Well, we're just going to see what happens. But the aim is to go out there and get 2 films and try and finish off what we didn't finish off last time. He's very busy, so it's hard to pin him down.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So that's in a couple of weeks. In amongst, because he still does his guiding, you know.
Yeah.
So it's
So
we've got that.
Guiding.
Yeah. So and then I am actually doing Corda booked me in ages ago to film.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that with Lewis Barge next week.
Where you going?
With the gaffer.
Where you going?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm flying to Copenhagen.
Denmark.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know what lake. You'll probably know more than me.
No, I know who you're going with. I know who's going to be there.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. So I'm doing that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. Me and Dan are gonna fly out, and Lewis is driving 14 hours.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't fancy that.
Yeah.
Right. Should we go to some questions? We've got lots of questions.
Good.
We have got Timothy.
Keep getting your questions in. We'll get through as many as we can.
Yeah. Timothy Robinson is first. Hi, Darrell and Scott. When using a chod rig, do you have a certain preference on length and hook size? When casting the chod, how important is the line lay, especially in weed? So when using the chod rig, do you have a certain preference on length?
I used to always fish mine as short as humanly possible, but in more recent times I started fishing them a little bit longer. Like I would say I'm looking for an inch between the eye of the hook and the eye of the swivel, and maybe up to 2 inches. You know, like depending if I think the weed's quite stemmy weed and there's a chance for the rig to fall down out of sight, then I will lengthen it. And I have fished them as tall as sort of 4 to 5 inches. At like late spring, you know, when the fish are not really feeding, like getting ready for spawning, and they're just sort of zipping around. I find almost like a zig rig, you know, having them a little bit higher gets their attention. But as a general rule, an inch and a quarter between the eye of the hook and the eye of the swivel. And what was the line lay part of the question?
When casting the chod, how important is the line lay, especially? A preference on length and hook size.
Yeah, so inch and a quarter between the eye of the hook and the eye of the swivel. Usually use a size 4 wide gape X hook, not a choddy. I prefer the downturned eye, which is fairly unique to me. Not many people do that. And line lay, it's more when I'm casting into weed with a chod rig. You know, it's if you hit a clip and then pull the rod tip back, you're forcing that chod rig down to the lead. So it's not. The whole point of using chod rig is so that the rig can slide up to a top bead, its position. So I feel it down in a different way in that I don't pull it through the water, I feather it down and then follow it down. I'm trying to force that chod rig up to the top bead so that it comes down to settles and stuff. And I'm also acutely aware that when you're sinking the line, you know, if you're overly firm with that, you could be pulling it down into the weed out of sight. So yeah, I don't like to fish chods over weed, like thick weed, at long range, because you always get that natural build-up of tension in the line. So yeah, I fish chods miles out on clearish bottom, where I'm not worried about it being sort of under too much tension. When I'm fishing it in the weed with a high top bead, yeah, I prefer it short range, and I'm very, very aware of like tension in the line and line lay.
Beautiful. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Daniel Hockaday, do you think that air pressure has different outcomes throughout the different seasons of the year for feeding fish? For instance, autumn air pressure to spring air pressure.
I'll be honest, I don't even check the air pressure at any time. And I don't think about it. I just, obviously, I know that low pressure coincides with wind and rain and stuff, and that high pressure can coincide with like clear skies as a general rule. But yeah, I fish to the time of year and the conditions more so. And by that, what I mean is there's certain times of year when the fish really are keen to come shallow. That can be March. March is a prime time to start suddenly catching fish in shallow water. It can be. And so can sort of like around spawning time, when they're really focused on coming into the edge, getting ready to spawn. So that's another time when fishing shallow can be sort of really key, and obviously certain weather conditions, high pressure, suit that. But yeah, I tend to fish to conditions and sightings without giving air pressure any consideration whatsoever. I've caught fishing textbook low pressure, and I have caught fishing high pressure when you say it's awful. But yeah, I don't even give it a thought. It doesn't enter my mind. It's not part of, I try and keep it a little bit cleaner and more. It's another thing to start worrying about. Where are the fish? What are the conditions like? Do I think they're high? Do I think they're low? Do I think they're shallow? Do I think they're deep? Don't give it air pressure. I know a lot of people think it's massive. Oh look, it's dropping below 1,000. Let's go fishing. But you can catch them in any conditions if you're doing it right.
Right. Yep. Liam Banks, evening lads. Darrell, the spots I'm finding on the lake, I'm fishing gravel sandy, but have quite a few small patches of weed on them, mainly silkweed. What would your approach be, rigs and bait wise?
If I was chucking out like freestyle, as in like not to a clip, just trying the fish are in an area, I'm trying to get my rigs out amongst the fish without disturbing them, then yeah, a naked chod could be a very good starting line of attack, because obviously you can fish the bead up a little bit, feel for a drop, and if you get a drop, you're fishing. But if I'm spot fishing, as in I'm clipped up, I've plumbed, I've found a patch of gravel, and I know that I'm going to land on that patch of gravel, then I'll fish with a Combi multi-rig, because I don't need a rig that presents over patches of weed, because I've been meticulous in my plumbing and I know that the rig's presented on gravel. So it's, if you're freestyling, a naked chod gives you a bit of peace of mind that you will be fishing, given that you get a drop. But if you're spot fishing, I'll be more inclined to fish, especially if I'm spomming, I'll be more inclined to fish on the bottom. But sometimes I'll fish pop-ups on hinge rigs and naked chods over spod mix, and although it's not what you'd say textbook, everyone thinks that once the fish are eating small particles that they ignore the pop-ups because they've seen it happen on underwater videos, and yeah, they do ignore the pop-ups for time. But also what happens is when the confidence gets to a boiling point, then a big greedy one can just slam in and take the pop-up, as again that's been shown on underwater films. So I've already answered it. Like generally, if I'm casting freestyle, I fish naked chod. But if I'm fishing on the spot, then I would, use a Combi multi rig with a wafter.
Beautiful. Chris Lines is going to the Manor in November. Have you got any tips?
Big Billy Scale Lake.
I assume so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I would suggest it's going to be really tough. I fished there twice in October now, and beginning of October was really productive for me, and the later it got, the more difficult it became. And I know that the guys that followed me on that first year, I don't know how many fish are in there. I think there's less than they think. Like Tom Dove and Neil and all that have just been there for 3 weeks. They've had filming for underwater. I've had drones up in the sky 24/7, and they've seen the stock swimming around, and they think it's probably closer to 70 fish. Now that first autumn that I fished there, I caught 35 fish in 3 weeks fishing. So that might be why it fished really tricky for them in November, because I'd done quite well. But I don't actually think it's that. I think that as the weed and all that starts to die back on those sorts of lakes, that the natural food suddenly becomes available, really abundantly becomes available. And if you fish a tiny little lake like that with loads of angling pressure around it all year, which it really does have a lot of angling pressure around it, then they get used to being fished for on the same spots, and they get used to how to avoid those spots. So my top tip would be find your own spots. Don't just get going. If there's a spot that's been doing bites consistently just before you get there, obviously that's red hot info. But if you're fishing on spots that haven't done bites in weeks and just thinking that your bait's better than someone else's bait, then it's going to be difficult. So yeah, my advice would be watch where the fish are feeding. Find your own spots where the weed's sort of receding and first getting clear, and they show and they jump like hell at night around that time of year. And it's a tiny little lake, so and don't ignore the shallows. In a lot of the fish at the back end of my first trip there, end of October, were really getting in the shallows, which you would think would be the opposite. You think would be heading deep in November, but they were really, really getting in the shallows. So, yeah.
Cool. Good luck. Let us know how you get on. Ross has asked, hi lads, going to a French commercial in 3 weeks, around 24 acres and 350 carp, but nuisance fish present. Would you go tiger and boilies only, and 3 on a spot and bait and weight?
Depends. Like the 3 on a spot thing is a brilliant way to maximise your baiting, but it works best when there's big clear spots or there's no weed at all, and the bait becomes the feature. When you're fishing a lake that's really weedy with small spots, your line lay is never that great into these spots, and by putting 3 in there you can make it a bit of a no-go zone for the fish. So yeah, if there is no weed, 3 on a spot can be good. If there's big clear spots with decent line lay into it, then 3 on a spot can be good. But yeah, if there's smaller spots, then yeah, spreading your rods around can be good. So I would generally start spreading my rods unless I was certain I was on the hero spot, So yeah, it's you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, and don't fill it in from the get-go. If you know nothing about the lake, in the grand scheme of things, like you don't really know what you're doing, you're sort of winging it. You don't want to just get there, put a load of bait in your swim and be trapped to that for the week, because you can't take it out. So yeah, my advice would be start with 3 different spots, start light, and if one rod starts really producing and you think you can move another one close to it, then do so. But yeah, it's really hard to give you solid advice about knowing the lake in the exact situation.
24 acres and like 300 carp. That's a big lake with not too many carp in, isn't it? Really, 24 acres, big slab of water with 350. I mean, obviously,
I think that a lot of the syndicates that I've fished over my lifetime, like a lot of them, have always people like there's 100 in here, 110, 120, and they are not hard lakes, but certainly not easy lakes. And if you're going to a lake in France that's got people sat around it day in, day out, if 300 carp, it's like, I think Sandhurst is like rumoured to have like 300 odd carp in it, something like that, but that's 14 acres. So it's the sort of lake where you could have it off, but it can also be difficult.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. Obviously, the more carp generally, I mean, like, if there's 300 carp in there, realistically, what are you hoping to catch in a week if there's a dozen of you around there? They're not all going to come out, are they?
No.
So it's going to be like out
on a really productive week on a lake with 300, you might see 50 come out.
Yeah.
And 50 by
10 anglers.
It's only 5 each.
Exactly.
And they won't be 5 each. One of them will
it'll catch a dozen.
Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah.
And 50 is having it off. Most weeks on a lake 300, it might be like 10.
Yeah.
10
so it's how do you get the most from knowing, like looking at the numbers side?
You fish for a bite. You fish for bites.
Yeah.
Like you look at someone like Tom Maker, who regularly has these massive hits. Right. It's very rare from when I've watched his videos and listened to him talk. You think he goes to lakes with 2,000 carp and he goes, I just pick a spot and fill it in.
Yeah.
Most of the time, he picks a spot, puts a dozen spoms out, and see how you go. Because a dozen spoms is enough to get a few fish feed.
Yeah.
And if he needs to top up, he tops up. So
Mm.
we all go to France with vanfuls, carfuls of bait, but it's not always the best course of action.
Here's another one for you on this scenario as well. So say it's 24 acres, 300 carp, argument's sake. Do you think the fish would be going round in big groups?
You can't say.
No?
Because I don't know the lake. If it's got no
Yeah.
snags
Yeah.
and it's no weed, then you can bet they'll just be like balling around, just like trying to dodge danger at all costs. But if you've got like areas of sanctuary where they can get out of it, they might just stay in there a lot of the time and get a few stragglers come out. And every lake is unique and has its own little thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's what you're trying to do when you go to anywhere is make a read on what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like a one tactic, one method suits all. You know, you're trying to work out what's going on and act and do the right thing.
Yeah, and I suppose finding out where what swims are being productive, etc., isn't it, as well, before you get there?
Ones, you know, the ones that have got a massive feature, you know, if you've got a lake that's got a huge bay of lilies, and you think, they're going to be in there. Or you've got an island with a massive hanging tree on it, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's like the obvious top house.
Yeah. Just go easy and don't fill it in initially.
Yeah, always go on the side of caution unless you're certain.
Yeah. Cool. Right, Joshua Finch just joined a clear, weedy and busy club water with a dozen 30s. Fish have already spawned. How would you approach it? What would you focus on to stand out and get bites under pressure? No rules. That's good.
Well, the most important thing on really weedy lakes is presentation. And you've got two lines of attack. You've got fishing in the weed, or you've got fishing around the weed. Most of the time, generally, I tend to fish around the weed, and what I do in that situation is I meticulously plumb for the best clear spots around the thickest weed beds where the fish are getting most regularly, and I write these down in my telephone, because casting your swim to death every time you go is going to scare the fish off. So make it, when you first get going, it's really important that you get round the lake. Say you're in a swim and you're really enjoying the productive part of the day, but you're going to stay in that swim. Use that time to go and plumb in other swims where there aren't fish. Take note of the best clear spots. Put notes into your telephone of horizon markers and wrap distances, so that when you come on a future session and you see fish in front of new swims, you know where the spots are in that swim before you start in. And the more spots that you have in your notes section, the more you don't. Sometimes lakes are all about one swim, 1, 2, 3 swims, but sometimes the fish get around every inch of that lake, and it pays to have multiple spots in multiple swims. So, I would say generally my tactic will be finding gravel patches, hard patches in and around the thickest weed, and then baiting extremely accurately to those. That's my normal method in that situation. But sometimes the most obvious spots, the fish aren't willing to feed on them because it's a small lake, they're under pressure, they know what's going on. And in that situation, fishing in the weed can be more productive with chod rigs, so rigs that present over blanket weed, or low-lying weed. I don't really like fishing chods in weed that's what I call stemmy, like when you've got stemmy or grassy weed. It doesn't really work that well, but fishing on sort of blanket weed, you can fish on top of Canadian pondweed with chod rig, sort of onion weed. That can be lethal when you're fishing small pressured lakes where the clear spots are just blown.
Cool. I've got one from the Session Diary. That's their name on CarpFix. Hi, Darrell. I've always been fascinated by how some of the best anglers keep a close eye on all the details of watercraft, like wind direction, moon phases, and everything else that's happening on the lake. Do you still see that as a key part of your fishing, and how do you record or track those details? Do you ever write them down or keep a sort of fishing log?
No, I don't keep a log. I'm just always aware of, or trying to be aware of, what's happening. Like when I see things happen, I try to understand why. Because then, if you cotton on to what's happening, if you notice that a certain big one always gets caught on moon phases, if you know that the fish turn up in a certain part of the lake on certain conditions, they keep doing it. They've been doing it from last few weeks. When you can second guess their movements, that means you can be ahead of the other. Because when all the fish turn up in a swim and everyone can see them, you might not get there in time. Or if a certain swim's producing bites regularly, that swim's going to become instantly popular with all the anglers. But if you can be acutely aware of what's happening, like making a read on the situation, and then you can get ahead of people. Like when you can see activity in an area building, you can see that the fish are starting getting there, and it hasn't been hammered yet. You might be the first one to get in there on certain conditions and fish it well and have the successes from it. So yeah, I'm trying to make a read on whether carp's behaviour, where they're going back and forth from, what the other anglers are doing, what swims aren't being fished regularly, what on the fish. Because if you're noticing the swim's getting left alone, the fish will be noticing that as well. And if a swim's been getting hammered, if it's got lines in it 24/7, a lot of people their watercraft begins and ends with other people's bites, and by that I mean, Joe Bloggs had 3 takes out of that swim. We all do it. I include myself in this. You're all like, the fish are coming from that swim. Get in there. Sometimes that can pay, but also it can be very, very, very easily be old news. And you've rushed the lake. You've not looked to fish. You've gone straight in a swim because someone had 3 out of there or whatever a week or so ago, and that's blown. It's happened. The swim's been hammered. Fish moved on to somewhere else. So always trying to understand what's going on by the fish's movements and the weather conditions is, that's where I want to be. I want to be looking for my own fish and trying to make an understanding of what they're doing and why I think they're doing it. Because if you know what they're doing and why they're doing it, you know what to do. Well, I feel like I know what to do if I have those pieces of information.
Cool. I just want to see if your mic, because when I talk, mine's a little bit louder than yours. I just want to see if. Oh yeah, you can. That might be better.
Am I a bit quiet?
Oh, that looks better.
A little bit better.
That's actually a little bit too loud. I'm just going to turn mine down a little bit. Just give us a little audio test, Darrell.
Right then, we're just going to have a little Q&A session with the CarpFix members.
You might find that a little bit better.
Sorry,
viewers.
guys.
Sorry. No, it's not. It's been all right. It's been in the green.
Yeah.
I just think it can be a little bit better.
Okay.
Maybe it is.
Fine tuning.
Yes. Stephen Sharp. Evening, lads. Can I ask why Darrell uses the liner method for his multi-combi rig and not just angled shrink tube?
Well, shrink tube is an absolute pain in the arse. That's like the bottom line of shrink tube is like, yes, it gives you a really neat finish, but like, it's just a pain in the butt. I'm not saying it isn't good because it does the job, but anything that makes my life easier, I'm all for that. If I think it's equally effective, and I think a kicker with the aligner, I've always done it like that. I'm not sure if it turns more aggressively like that, but I've always a liner is not a new thing. It's been done for years. I think Jim Gibbonson invented the liner, and I've done it for so long, caught so many fish, I don't even give it a second thought. But with regards to kickers over shrink tube all day, all day, every day. Shrink tube. If you're using shrink tube, mate, give yourself a break. give yourself a break.
Yeah. The new combi kickers that you had a lot of input in. They're very nice.
Yeah. I haven't got any in packaging. I'm still got the samples.
Oh.
So like I because they last.
The product's exactly the same though. The one that's
exactly.
the finished version.
Exactly, but I haven't got any of the brown ones. They're like the translucent brown ones.
Yeah.
Obviously that was later.
Yeah.
But they gave me like a pinchful. Do you imagine like there's a big pile of
Here you go, Darrell. Here's 5.
No, big pinch.
All right.
It's like probably like 30 or 40, and I've had these for a couple of years, and they last so long on your rigs. One little top tip I'll give you is when you pack up at the end of your session and you hook your rig on the butt ring, I don't leave the kicker on, because if you leave it in your rod bag with the kicker on pulled tight, you're just going to straighten it right out and bend it out of shape. So always pull the kicker onto the braided section before I hook it onto the butt ring, and then your kicker will be in tip-top condition for when you next go.
There's a top tip for you.
Top tip.
Top tip to prolong the kickers.
Yeah, and when they're in your rig board as well, don't leave them. Don't put the hook don't put them on the hook on the rig board.
Pull them back off.
Yeah, just leave them on the braid.
There you go. It's top tip. Worth watching just for that if you use them.
Yeah.
Lee Sturk. Hi guys, just first time on the live. Usually listen afterwards in the car. When using sweet corn in the mix, would you favour yellow hook baits, and have you had more luck over other colours?
Generally fish yellow over the top, like as a general rule, but I've done very, very well with pink over the top. Pink. Pink is this, like, for me, pink is like what I call the most hit and miss colour in the world, because you get two real clear reactions to it from what I've seen on underwater. Is you get the, oh my God, I'm not having that, that's too scary, like, and then the reverse of that, oh my God, there it is right in the middle, and they just zone straight in and take it. So pink is like, for me, it's like, yeah, they either have it or they don't, you know. But the strong, when they take it, they can select it from long range and just smash it. And they're the ones you hook, the ones that come in too ballsy and just overconfident, and yeah, they hang themselves. But quite often, like a yellow tipper fish match the hatch. Go more on the corn, as in, my favourite way to fish sweet corn is straight, and my favourite way to fish any bait is straight. I'm not, in my head, I don't really love a mix. I think if you've got exactly the right thing, if they're tuned into sweet corn, if you're feeding straight sweet corn and fishing plastic sweet corn over the top, that's number one. If you're fishing tigers and you're fishing tigers on the hook, that's number one. You know, when you start putting a bit of a mix out there, it's like, what do they actually want? You know, the best thing about mixes is that they make your spomming better. You know, it's very... A lot of baits don't spom nicely, as in they move around in the spom. And by putting boilie crumb with your mix, you can create more of a cementy sort of... It shakes down to the nose and it stays there. And accurate baiting in itself is a huge edge, rather than like spread baiting a lot of the time. So, yeah, I think my best ever results from sweet corn have been when I fish it straight. We've matched the hatch with plastic on the top. But yeah, I've also done really well with pink over the top as well.
Cool. Tristram, Le Bon Olive.
Ah, Frenchy.
Oh, it's from somewhere around there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
What light or flash do you use to keep the ISO to a minimum on the camera for night shots?
I've just got a Canon top flash. I can't tell you what it is. Do you know what they're called?
No,
but I always shoot with the ISO at 400, and I always shoot with a shutter speed of 2 to 250 of a second. And one thing that I've noticed is whenever you know, on the white balance, when you set it to the flash setting, it is always too hot. Always. Everything looks gold. So I've actually been using the sun setting with a flash, the sun white balance, and I find that much more realistic.
Yeah.
You know, I've always found that the flash white balance is just, it comes out looking, everything's gold. You know.
It depends what camera I think you have, and whether you've got like lights as well. And
yeah, if you've got two side lights both lighting up the background, so they're not actually on the fish.
Yeah,
they're coming in diagonal behind the fish towards the background, so that illuminates the whole sort of bit behind you, and you've got your top flash. I think that's how you get your best ones.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I've noticed as well, from not me personally, but some of the articles I've read from much better photographers than me, is they're shooting on much slower shutter speeds to let in more light. They're shooting on like 60th of a second, not 250s.
So what I've been doing, and I've been doing this for quite a while, is not even because I've got a camera. I'm using an R6, and I've got the big light on top. When I'm doing a picture at night of anyone holding the fish, all I'm doing is having the light on full whack
on the top.
On the top, yeah. So you've got the big flashlight on. So I'm not using a flash.
It's like
big
an LED.
Yeah,
board
quite.
thing.
It's like that kind of size. So I've got that full whack, and then the shutter's quite low. ISO's probably like 800, 1000. If you go any higher than that on the R6, you start to get a little bit of noise.
Yeah.
But I don't need a flash or anything. Just have that one light on, and I get nice pictures. I'm doing it with a 85 prime,
Yeah.
not a mega expensive one, just a standard one, the R mount, and I get nice pictures from that.
Okay.
But not everyone can, I don't think, do it like doing self takes like that. I don't know if it'll work, because the only reason I can do it with a lower flash is because I've got the big light on. I think if you're using a flash, you have to have like minimum 200, is it, or 120?
I think so. I think the flash has to be.
I'm not too clued up on that, but
shot at that.
Yeah, if you can put just a big top light on, and you have like a solid-ish background, it works quite well. I get some nice pictures.
I might have to try that. I might have to get myself one. Another thing to carry around.
Well, you need a you could try it. I don't know. You have to just try it, don't you? Anyway, hopefully that helps a little bit. Joshua Finch. This is a carry on from an earlier question by the looks of it. Finally, what line would you use for a clear lake with weed that you need to cast 100 plus yards on? Oh, so this might be the guy that's on the 24-acre lake, maybe? I'm not too sure.
If I'm going to use mono on a clear lake, cast over 100 yards, I generally use that tape. When I'm fishing far out, I generally use that quarter long chuck, the tapered stuff. In the heavier one, the heavier breaking strain, which is the 0.33, I think it comes up a little bit thicker. Like, normally you can see by how filled your reel is by the 300 metre spool, because I've always used Beziers. And I think it says it's 0.33, but I personally think it's probably more like 3.5. Which is definitely strong enough for fishing in weed, but with that like 0.47 leader section, it casts it. You can cast big heavy lead on it. So yeah, that's generally when I'm trying to fish far with mono. I fish with the tapered long chuck, and if I'm not fishing too far, then I'll fish with the long chuck in 20 pound.
Cool. I've lost where I was.
You'll find it.
I know I'm way further up. Oh yeah, there it is. It just joined a clear, weedy and busy club water. It was that guy, dozens of 30s. It was that dude. Where is he? Here we go. Tom Lowe. Have you ever fished Merrington? If so, any tips for the end of June? You ever fished there?
Never heard of it. No.
It's down in Kent, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, I think there's a few lakes there, I think.
I don't know.
Jace. Evening, guys. Hope everyone is well. Regarding the Combi multi-rig, how do you dictate the length of the boom? Does this dictate from the hook holds, as I'm getting carp being hooked at the side of the scissors? Would you recommend doing anything to change? Rig length is the same as Pecky's specs normally.
Yeah, I always fish with a 5-inch boom, because it makes the ended up the finished rig is around 7 inches, which I just think is there's a reason why that's the average length, because it's, when you fish a rig too short, you risk hooking them on the edge of the mouth. When you fish it too long, you give them too much time to spit it out, realise they've got something, and I think that 7-inch rig is the reason it's a general purpose, is because it's the right length, and I think a 5-inch boom is a real safe sweet spot for that rig. I know Dovey and that use 7s, and you won't go wrong with a 7. I think when you go short, you're risking nicking them. And I know you're saying you're getting scissor hook holds like in the corners of the mouth. For me that's the perfect place, like bottom side. It's not bony in there. And I think that's a really good place for the hook to be sitting.
Cool. Old Bob is going to France in a couple of weeks. It's a 4-acre lake exclusive on his own.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, very nice. Any general tips for this type of venue? It's normally fished by 2 anglers from one peg with some crayfish present.
Yeah, I would have a really, really good look around for spots on the first day. Real good look or lead around. I don't know if you're going to use a boat or whatever, but I'd have a real good search, make a lot of disturbance on day one. I would pick the spots that I'm going to fish and also some spots that I'm going to bait. And I would start on a spot of spots that your first opening line of attack, and then I'd keep my eye on the other areas that I'd baited. And if, depending on whether I was catching or wasn't catching, I would then move on to those secondary patches later in the week, especially if you see signs there, and it can pay to move between like resting spots for a day and then moving on to it and then moving back can be really effective. Having the lakes yourself will be an edge because it have less lines in it. They'll be under less pressure. but yeah, small lakes will always have what I call like scaredy cat carp. You know, they're under pressure. They're very aware they're being fished for. And I would just try and keep your disturbance down. Try and keep your lines down if you can, and don't go wild with the bait because small lakes like that, I've seen it a lot.
Cool. Josh Holstead. Hi lads, just imagine that £105 immaculate common under your rod tip. On a side note, will you adopt the shot on the hook onto your bottom bait presentation? Curious on the professionals' thoughts.
So what was the first part about the old immaculate?
Just imagine that £105 immaculate common under your rod tip.
Well, we were having a little chat about that before we went live. I reckon over the years I must have fished 15 weeks on Gigantica, 15 separate 1 week sessions. And Dan probably much more than that. Neither of us have caught the immaculate common. And they say, if you read the bit on the website, they say it gets caught from the beach quite regularly. Bob's Beach, it likes it there, and it likes it in Baxter's Hole. But what you got to remember is there's someone in those two swims every week of the year, right, or most weeks of the year, and they're all reading that same bit on the website, thinking they're going to be the one to catch that fish. And yet it's often, not this on this occasion, but often years are in between captures, 2-3 years. It's not uncommon for that fish to go missing for that long. And there's probably been like over 100 anglers in that swim or those swims in between times that didn't catch it. So it's an incredible achievement to catch that fish. And for it to weigh £105 is just mind-blowing. The rod hours that are going into that lake, the rod hours, like 10 to, I think there's 12 people on every week, all fishing 3 rods, and it's coming out every few years, and it's £105. Like, yeah, it's, that's a fish of a lifetime in every sense. And yeah, if I caught it, I'd probably sell my gear and start going. Because there's not a lot, you can't go far, you can't go anywhere from that. But what was the second part of the question?
Will you adopt the shot on the hook into your bottom bait presentation?
I'm such a stubborn old goat, I don't like to change stuff, but I can certainly see how it works. What I need is to just fish somewhere really easy and catch a load of fish on it. Because once you've done that, it becomes second nature. You're not fit. If you're fishing somewhere tough and you're doing something new, then you've got something to put an excuse on. You're like, is that why I'm not catching? But if you've used it on somewhere really easy and caught really, really well on it, then you'll feel more comfortable sitting behind rods that aren't going. And I need to do that because I'm not someone who likes to change things, because I've caught so many fish on the things that I do. It allows me to think freely about other things, like where the fish are, how much bait to put out, all of that. So yeah, I may adopt it, but it will be a very, very slow process.
Carl Prattley, what do you think is more important, rig or bait choice? You can catch on a bit of chopped off croc, but you're unlikely to catch on poorly tied rig.
Disagree. It's got to put it in its mouth in the first place. It's got to want to eat it. And yeah, they will eat a bit of, like, people, I think when he says chopped up croc, I think what he means is flip flop. That's what people used to say when there's like zig fishing. But a bit of flip flop, mate. Yeah. And yeah, that is crazy that they do suck in a flavourless bit of black foam, and even crazier that they suck it in at night. But yeah, rigs could be as basic as like literally a knotless knot, or you could hook a boilie, and as long as the hook point is exposed, it'll snag in the fish's mouth when the rig is pulled tight to the lead. So I think bait and bait choice, application, like what you're using, how accurate your baiting is, how much you put out, I think that's more important than the rig itself, personally.
Cool. Lyndon, what size combi kicker would you use on a wide gape X size 6, and how far in do you want the eye?
Well, they've got like a little recess for the eye, but where there's a slight angle. The size 6 is designed to be used with a medium kicker. Now, they are tight, especially the first time you use them. And I have had trouble when it's freezing cold. Say it's winter, you've just caught fish, your fingers are freezing because you've just got wet hands, and you're trying to put that back over the eye. It can be difficult. And in that case, you could use the larger size and cut it back to the same length because it's just a slightly wider bore. But generally, medium for a size 6. And if you are struggling to get that over a size 6, use the larger one, but cut it back to the same length as the 6.
Cool. Leon Davidson, I'm off to Swan Valley in the middle of July. 4 nights booked. Have you been back since? If not, is there anything you would have done differently?
No, I think Swan Valley is it's quite a weedy lake. Again, very, very pressured. Fish are constantly moving away from anglers. I think the go-to tactic is like bait boats to bushes and stuff. I think that's sort of what most people do. When we were there, it was the bailiff put me onto he said there's a clear spot out in this swim in a quite weedy part of the lake at the deeper end. The wind was blowing up there and caught them, so didn't need to move. But they do get around. On our session, they were getting around all of the lake. My main piece of advice would be if you're not catching, then don't sit it out. Go looking because there'll be an opportunity somewhere on there. And I know they've changed. I think they've dug it. There was like a net or something great separating 2 parts of the lake when we were there. I think they've pulled that up and the fish can use the whole lake now. So that'll be a different thing entirely.
Cool. Luke Clements, all right, lads, what rig would you use for a 20mm bottom bait? Could I drill and cork a 20mm boilie and use it with the multi-combi rig?
Yes.
Keep up the good work, lads.
That's what I would do. I want a little bit this year. I want to fish a little bit more match the hatch style, as in using baits out of the bag, but just putting a bit of buoyancy on them so that the boilie always sits up the right way and the hook sits on the bottom. Sometimes with bottom bait, I'm always worried that the hook can end up sitting on top of the boilie because the boilie sinks real quickly, and sometimes the hook could end up on top. You still catch, like that. But yeah, I think a tiny little bit of cork in the top would be perfecto.
Right, it's a long one. Do you want me to read it? Or do you just want to
read it?
Matthew Farmer. Hi both, hope you're well. Darrell, I previously watched your piece on how you made your 18mm Bonoffi wafters. I've seen that you use the ratio of 1 cup pop-up mix to 2 cup boilie mix. If you want to make the pop-ups, would you use even amounts of 2 cups each? You boiled your 18mm for 2 mins, but you doing 15mm. Would you use the same time or less? If so, how long for? I will try and make them as I have a 15mm rolling table. Would love to give them a try.
You must make pop-ups, you say?
Yes.
I would just use the pop-up mix. There's no need to be putting any base mix in there. So you would go straight in with the Polaris pop-up mix. And you'd use the same flavours and eggs combination. And for pop-ups, 15mm, I'd probably boil them for 2 minutes. Yeah, I want my pop-ups quite hard. I don't want them soft. So yeah, I'd probably go read the instructions, but I would say minimum 90 seconds, but probably 2 minutes. Yeah, and don't put any base mix in. Just use the pop-up mix.
Cool. Chris is watching from France, a week exclusive, and currently blanking my ass off. Struggling.
Know the feeling.
Yeah, struggling with a lot of surface weed and maybe spawning 2 nights ago. Yeah, spawning 2 nights ago. Any words of wisdom? It's tricky, innit, when you go fishing and they like.
Yeah, it's when they're spawning,
yeah.
That's when they're spawning, they're not interested in eating. That's the thing. They're like, literally, it's an annual thing that like hormonally they're just like, I think they just lose their mind. Like, I think they're prepared to kill themselves to get the ritual done, and the last thing that they're considering is eating anything.
Yeah, worry about that later.
Yeah, like once they've, because quite often they almost go through like a recovery period. It's like, so I have been on lakes where it's fished its absolute nuts off after spawning, like I have been. But I've also been on lakes where it goes real moody, like where the fish just almost seem tired and they're just resting up, Yeah, I don't really. If they're, if you're on holiday, they're spawning. You've got a built-in excuse there. It's. I know you want me to give you the bit of advice that's going to change the game, but I'm not sure there always is that piece of advice.
Yeah.
Fishing's fishing. You've got to look for opportunities. If they're not feeding too heavily, it certainly won't be about filling it in. It might be just finding a little margin spot where they're coming into, because around spawning time they get really obsessed with shallow water, And it might be all about just a tiny little shallow spot somewhere where they might just drop down and have a little nibble or a little feed. So, yeah, difficult one to answer that.
It is. Gaz the Jailer, good evening, gents.
He's a regular.
He is. No question, just good evening. He's
Good
probably
evening.
had a few too many. Stephen Sharp, do you guys spool up to different levels or different types of line, braid, etc., or even distance you're fishing?
Right. I never, ever overload my reels. Like when I see a lot of people, they'll fill their reels up to the absolute max because they think it's going to really help them cast further. And I haven't really noticed it makes that much difference. You know, what I have noticed is when you're on the edge, as in you're right to the lip, you are very, very, very much increasing the chance of a bird's nest. If you're using braid, that's going to be like almost guaranteed. If you're using mono, especially heavy mono, again, you're very, very likely to get a bird's nest. I find when you get that just a little lip, you know, and why I want that little lip there is it's almost like an automatic feather. You know, it's like you've created this bit of friction that stops the line from flying off too quickly. And for the distance, I've never found it make that much difference. You know, sometimes like people commented like, I've got 200 metre spool of contour on my reel. It's blatantly underfilled, and they're like, oh, why haven't you got backing on there? And I don't think it will make that much difference. When I'm using fluorocarbon, I'm never fishing far out generally, so I'm not worried about it having that bit of friction. So yeah, I don't overfill. Especially a braid, it's a suicide. You know, there's no need to do it with braid. Mono, you can get away with having it a little bit more filled, but yeah, you definitely want some form of lip, in my opinion.
Yeah, cool. Steve Harris, just started fishing a new venue. Just wondered what's the best way to approach regarding pre-baiting. Steve from Mallorca.
New venue, best approach to pre-baiting. Don't pick the popular swims because people will be fishing over your bait. You know, pick quieter swims, and you want to try to do it without other people knowing you're doing it. You know, if you're, say it's an edge spot, if you can cup your bait in on a baiting spoon so no one can hear it going in, then people might accidentally fish on it, but they won't be gunning for it. If you tell people that you're baiting, quite often they'll just go and fish on it because you've been doing that. So yeah, I would tend to pick unpopular swims, and it's easiest to do it if you haven't got to spom it. If you can throw it in by hand, if you can spoon it in, if it's short range, it makes it that much easier to do. And yeah, make the effort to try and not to be seen.
Cool. Stephen Hayes, do target fish get caught from the same swim or spots, or are places they have been caught to avoid? So I mean, like the immaculate.
There's definitely certain fish that like certain areas. You know, there's definitely something in that. But there's also a lot of what I call like folklore that people say that fish doesn't get caught from that swim, and then it's proved wrong. So like anything is possible in carp fishing, and what I mean by that is like a fish that's never been caught from a swim before can come from that swim, or if it's been come from the same swim 10 times, it can come from there 11 times. There's no hard and fast rule, but if there are certain fish do show tendencies for certain swims at certain times of year, and as you just mentioned, like that immaculate common has been caught from. Like put this into perspective. Like Coe's Point is probably the best swim on Gigantica. You know, it's certainly the most famous. It's consistently one of the best producers, and to my knowledge, I'm almost certain that the immaculate common has never been caught from that swim. Now, does that mean that it's never getting caught from there? No, it doesn't mean that. But it's getting caught from the beach swim, and it's getting caught from Baxter's Hole fairly frequently. And you wouldn't say that they are, I wouldn't say they're unpopular swims, but I certainly wouldn't say that they're the most productive. They're some of the lesser productive swims. And for I think that's really important to get across, that fish isn't getting caught from the most productive pegs, and it is showing a liking for these two swims. And I think if if your holiday to Gigantica is mainly about trying to catch that fish, I don't think you go far. Like, you're going to accept that when you go in those swims, that you might not have as a productive a week as you could somewhere else, but you're trying to stack the odds in your favour of catching that particular big one. Now, yeah, that's that one fish, and each and every fish is unique, and at the same time, anything is possible. You know, it can suddenly come out from another swim. You know, so yeah, it's guessing. There's no facts involved there. You know, you're putting pieces of information together, going on a hunch, but that fish is a fish and can do what it wants. So it's never guaranteed.
Yeah. Sean Davies got a question about Twaziels and one of the rules on there. Now, I do know that the rules on there are translated, like auto-translated. So the rule reads that it's not allowed to fish with lead core or with a lead system if the line breaks the fish and then there's not the rest of it. I'm guessing you're touching on the lead core, but from my understanding, you're not allowed to use lead core on there.
No, I don't think you're allowed. I don't think you're allowed leaders. I don't think.
So basically, I think we can get clarity from Nicole, or if you ask her, she'll be able to translate as to what it actually means. But the translation with the lead system, it's saying not allowed to use a lead system. You are allowed to use a lead system. That is just the translation. The main thing I take from it is you can't use lead core.
Yeah, I think it's leaders. I think you're not allowed leaders.
Yeah, that lead system is probably meant to say leaders. Lead core and leaders.
I think it's probably meant to say that you're supposed to use a rig that the lead can discharge from.
Yeah,
that's probably what it's meant to say.
Yeah, because we had a similar thing with a translation before. But just the best thing to do is just message Nicole and she'll
Nicole
confirm.
put you correct.
Yeah. Ross, lads, do you think things like naturals, crumb and particle is asking for trouble when there's bream, roach and perch around in the lake? Yeah.
Yeah. If you've got abundance of natural fish, like a mixed course fishery, and you put naturals out, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be feeling keeping it up. No.
Oliver Coppen, can you talk a bit about matching bottom baits versus is a standout bright one?
Well, mate, I'm so guilty of this. Like, I'm going to tell you to do something that I don't do that often myself. But, like, if you think about all of the videos that you've seen from Corda, whoever else, right, and all the anglers, there's been a massive period in angling now where pop-ups and wafters have been used. Now, it has to do with certain rigs like Ronnie rigs, hinge rigs, Chod rigs. And we're all buying tubbed hook baits, putting the tractors on them and having these high visual hook baits on there. Now, they're brilliant at the right time of year, but when you've got fish eating bait, as I mentioned earlier, when you've got them eating boilies, when you've got them eating sweet corn, when you've got them eating tigers, you can't be having the same thing on the hook. Sometimes they will pick out a bright one, you know, on any venue. They might just they see a pink one in amongst all the rest and they zone in and have that. But yeah, match the hatch is so underrated, and a lot of people aren't doing it. And going against the grain can be a super successful method. And I'm personally trying from now on. You know, I think once you get past spawning, I think that going on a more match the hatch sort of thing between now and the autumn is probably an edge on a lot of lakes.
Cool. Slater, how are we doing, lads? What would your go-to shock leading material to join onto 15-pound long chuck, and what knot would you use to connect the two materials together?
Did he say mono or braid?
He didn't say, no.
So if I was going to be fishing mono to mono, I wouldn't use a knot. I would literally just use a tapered line. If I had to join two monos together, I'd use the tapered leaders, the tapered long chuck leaders, because they go thin and that will make your knot small. Whereas if you're tying heavy mono to light line, you will almost certainly have a big bulky knot that will go through the rings horribly. So a tapered leader to the mono would be one way of doing it, and the best knot for that is a 4-turn water knot. Obviously just search that on YouTube and you'll find that. Danny showed me that one years ago. But I much prefer, if I can, to use the tapered line if it's mono straight through. And if I want to cast really, really, really far, then a braided leader will help you go further because it takes a stretch out of that first part of the cast. And you can use like a 30-pound armour cord leader, which make a tiny little knot. So, I'd use an Albright. So I'd fold over the mono and do an Albright up and back down with a braid. That's you'll cast much further with a braided leader.
Cool. Terry Goddard has asked, hi guys, Pecky, when fish are showing in a certain area of the lake, how do you approach chucking out singles, lead size, and how close? How long would you wait before chucking a single?
I chuck singles to fish a lot of the time, and if they're really close in, I'll use little leads. And if they're really far out, I'll use big ones because it's just obviously for the range. But ideally, if you can get away with it, a small one's nice, because you're casting amongst showing fish. But at the same time, I've hammered 4.5 ounce leads out in amongst a pack of fish at 150 yards and had a take instantly. Getting your rig out to them as quickly as possible is the most important thing, and doing it with as little casting as possible. I think they're the most important things. Like when say for example, I've seen fish jumping and I cast out to them and I can't get a good drop and I end up having a few casts to try and get a good drop. It's quite rare that rod actually goes because I've made a bit of disturbance getting it out. But when I have cast out to fish and it's gone out there one and done, and they've got a good drop, I feel the odds are high, and there's lots of times when that's worked for me. Lots of times when that's worked for me.
Cool. Michael hasn't I think he maybe copied and pasted, but didn't finish it off. But he said, "Hi Darrell, I fish a 10-hectare lake that is stock carp, but also carp up to 30 kilos, which have been stocked. The fish are swimming there, but you don't catch the big ones." And then it kind of says carp up to 15. So, is there any way to approach catching the bigger fish?
They've been stocked.
Yeah.
Chance.
Get on the pellets.
I don't know the lake, so I don't want to talk out of turn. But at the same time, sometimes there's people say there's fish in lakes that there's not. What I mean? When they've died, like they've stocked big fish, they've bellied up, and they don't want to say. That definitely goes on because people are protecting their income and not your holiday. But for selecting bigger fish, generally a straight boilie approach selects bigger fish. You'll catch more on bits and pieces and crumb and all of that. But when you fish straight boilies and straight boilie rigs, you do tend to catch a bigger average stamp as a generalising, very, very broad brush statement. And I stand by that. You'll catch less, but you'll catch bigger ones as a general rule. And fishing bigger boilies will increase that further. It will slow your catch rate down, but you might only get a handful of fish as opposed to say 20 fish if you're using say 24 mil boilies. But your average size will generally be bigger. The more crude you fish, the more the little fish ignore it and leave it in place long enough for a bigger one to find as a general rule.
Cool. Sam Lemon, evening lads. Darrell, have you got your eyes on any fish at the moment?
I've got my eyes on one in particular. Yeah, I've been fishing over Burfield a little bit this spring. It took me a little bit of while to get going, as in I didn't. I planned to get going from the beginning of April, but things are just work commitment, things popping up, getting in the way, lake being busy. Started sort of end of April, and we're now into June, like the first week of June. So it's only been like 5 weeks we've been going, and the lake was closed for 2-3 weeks for spawning. So like it's been a bit stop-start. So yeah, the Burfield Common hasn't been caught for 4 years this June. In June, it's 4 years now, and it's done 4 years between captures previously. But we believe it's still there, and I think I wouldn't say highly likely. I think it's likely that somebody was going to catch it this year. And I think if it does get caught this year, it'll be between now and August. I think that's the best chance. And that fish has been over £40 since I was 20 years old. So I'm 43 now. So in 23 years, I've been following that carp. It's only made 13, 14 captures, I believe, something like that. And I fished there in 2014, the year Dave Lane caught it. And if you put this into perspective, I pulled off there in 2015, and in the time that I've been gone, it's only been caught 4 times.
Savage.
you know, and you think of the rod hours and, you know, the quality of the anglers that are sat around it. So for me to say I'm going there and I'd like to catch the Burford Common, like on my first year back, I think it's very short-sighted, very, very short-sighted. I'm in the mix. I'm there. I'm trying my best, but it's hard enough to get caught for it to get caught by, you say that it's not like most. Say, if I give you an example to put things into perspective, I fished at Coninbrook to catch two-tone when I was in my mid-20s. I was 24, 25, something like that, fishing for a British record carp. So it was absolutely rammed, 30-acre lake, absolutely rammed every single night. But if someone else caught it, it wasn't the end of the world, because it was getting caught 3, 4, 5 times a year. 5 times. 5 times is probably a good 5 times between April and October. So it's like 5 times in a year. If someone else catches it, you've got another chance later on in the year. If someone else catches it this year, then the chances are I won't be caught for another couple of years, and it'd probably be dead in the next few years. It's ancient, absolutely ancient. So yeah, for me it's like the final frontier. It's like you're reaching for something that is on the verge of being impossible. You know, it's like, yeah, it's like trying to run a 100-meter sprint in under 10 seconds or under 9.5 seconds. It's probably as rare as that, you know. And the reality is that it's been a 50, 60, 70 man syndicate, whatever it has, for as long as it has. And 99.999% of people that fish, they don't catch it, and I include myself in that number. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you put it like that.
Yeah.
Right, Tom Lowe, when you mention moon phases, what exactly is a good time in regards to moon phases?
My favourite period of moon phases is the run-up to the new moon and the run-up to the full moon. So for me, I really, really like the 2 nights before and the night of. And I don't really favour the nights after. People say it's the 3 nights either side. For me, it's the 2 nights before and the main night of the actual night of it that I've had my best success. But saying that, I've also really sort of pitched my sessions in that way. I love to fish a long session up to a moon phase, because I think it's a little bit far-fetched to think that you just cast your rig in the lake and the carp finds it because it's a full moon. I like to think that if you're there in the lead up to it, your every piece of information is you're following like a trail of crumbs that are bringing you to the right place at the right time. And that's what a lot of people don't take into. They think the moon phase is magic. I can't tell you why big carp or certain big carp get caught on moon phases. I've literally haven't got the faintest idea. But sometimes, I've said this to my friends before, that you if you don't, it's better if you can understand something, then you know how things work and you can react accordingly. But sometimes you don't know the answers to everything, but you still know, you believe it to be true. And if you believe it to be true, then you lean everything you can to sort of put yourself in the right place at the right time. So yeah, I've caught carp completely off moon phases. But in the last God knows how long, many years, 10, 12, 15 years, I've been sort of not always focusing all of my fishing, but I look back and I know I've caught some big uns on the night and the lead up to these big moon phases.
Cool. Darren Williamson, hopefully that answers your questions as well. He asked about the moon phases as well. Michael, hello lads, hope you're well. Heading to Carp Arena at the end of this month. My rig choice is normally a spinner on a hybrid lead clip. 5.5 inches of boom, size 4 crank. Any tips or changes?
No, if that's what works for you, then yeah, I would be happy to use that. I would say that it can be quite soft in places, so just be aware that when you're lowering it down from the boat, if you are lowering it onto a soft patch, that you're not lowering it down too fast and like giving the boom a chance to be stuck out the bottom like that. So just lower it down to the bottom gently, and that'll be absolutely fine.
Cool. Stephen Welch, good evening guys, hope you're all well. I've booked Gigantica Road Lake in June. Any tips or advice like bait, choice, line, etc.? And also, can you answer if mainline baits are only mainline baits are only making ready-mades now?
No, definitely making freezer baits still, for sure. Road Lake is completely weed free, as a general rule, if I believe I'm correct in saying that. And there's not any real long casts on there. There's some longish casts, but I would always look to use fluorocarbon because I'm comfortable fishing fluorocarbon up to 25 wraps, and I think having your line well down out the way on pressured lakes like that is a big edge. The fish have got a real habit of hanging around in certain areas on Road Lake. Now that bund, there's a new swim being, I don't know what it's called, but there's a new swim near the bund. But the decoy, what's the one I fished on the
I can't remember.
Yeah, the decoy, the one opposite that we made a film in, and the new swim up that end, they are going to be flyers. And any of the swims that have got a no fishing bank, when I say like a bank that hasn't got swims along it, they can be really good areas. And with regard to bait, if you're in a flyer and you're on fish, you can use loads of bait on Road Lake because there's loads of big ones in there. But it's also possible to come out the draw late, end up in a swim nowhere near the fish, and in that situation, you're probably better off going fishing for a bite at a time.
Cool. Zigman, in a lake with a lot of nuisance fish, is there some edge to put in spod mix, also particles, or is it better to bait just boilies?
Best to do is bait tigers if there's real loads of nuisance fish. Like tigers for me are the best bait when there's nuisance fish. They're one of the best baits anyway, but they nuisance fish struggle to crush them. The teeth aren't strong enough in smaller nuisance fish to crush them up, and they tend to leave them alone.
Josh Mercer, hey guys, hope you're both well. Heading to Lac Luna soon. Have you ever fished it? If so, how did you get on? If not, would it be somewhere you would like to fish? There's some lovely fishing there. Is that the one with the tower?
Yeah. Stokes' been there a few times.
Lovely fishing there.
Yeah, I know Corda on a film. Didn't Dovey and Spooner fish there?
Underwater.
Yeah.
The test tapes.
Yeah. So I've never been there. I know Roy that owns it, but I've never been there, so I don't know anything about it really.
Marco, an immaculate evening, everyone. Is there a material out there that is stiff enough to avoid the knot on the multi-combi rig, and when stripped, soft enough to provide a soft end to the flexibility?
Well, you can tie an Albright knot with any material. You just need more. If it's a smoother, more supple material, you would just need more turns. Let's say you're going to use Supernatural or something like that. You could do like 5 or 6 turns up of the doubled over material like that, and then you could do 2 or 3 turns back down, and that will make the knot more secure with a softer, suppler braid. So yeah, you could do that, but you could get more tangles like that because I haven't tried it. But yeah, if you really wanted a softer material, then that's what I would do.
Cool. We've got a couple more questions left. Where are they gone? Here they are. Here they are. Coppo, could you use your Combi multi-rig in a solid PVA bag? If not, what rig would you use?
You could use a multi-rig in a solid bag, and I have done on we've done that really early film on CarpFix. We've done the Park Lake in Southend Priory, and fished with a little a braided hook link with the multi loop tied in the end, so you could change the hook. But yeah, I wouldn't fish a stiff boom inside a solid bag. No.
Cool. Coppo, I'm also fishing in France in late August. There are tension there. Would you use straight tigers?
Quite often I do.
Yeah.
Tigers and boilies are a great way, great combo. But tigers are obviously cheaper than boilies in most instances.
Yeah. Cameron, evening lads. Isaac, hello from Canada. Hope all is well. Looking to get out on the bank tomorrow. Good luck. Cameron, any tips for fishing zigs above weed or beside it? That is your last question.
Well, the main tip would be to make sure that they're strong enough. You're fishing around weed that you're gonna get them in. But like I mentioned earlier in this podcast about like blatant spots on small weedy lakes, the carp can just be terrified of them because every angler goes in the swim, plums up, spoms up on these clear spots, and they can spend a lot of time, like somewhere like, say, like Kingfisher Lake at Bluebell, where it's quite weedy, quite deep, and in the summertime they're spending loads of time just swimming around the tops of the weed beds. And me and Scott made an early Corda no privileges masterclass there, and I caught I think I had one and lost one on a zig, just like a 10-foot zig in about 14 foot of water above the weed, and no one was catching. And it's a zig placed above weed can sometimes definitely intercept fish that are cruising by, but they're also avoiding the clear spots a lot of the time. So that can be a good way of fish.
Cool, that's it. So next Friday's film is
part two
of the
Serpentine.
At the back lake when you caught quite a few fish, and then we've got the Pump House film.
Yeah,
so we've got back to back with you, and then it will probably be the first film with Derek. That'll be at the end of the month, and then we'll follow that at the start of July.
Yeah.
And then we've got some nice, exciting filming with Stokesy coming up.
Oh, yeah. Stokesy's going after the old big fully in the Manor.
So that
hasn't been caught recently as well. So
no,
when does that start?
Starts in 3 weeks.
Oh, mate, it's so due out.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't come out before he gets there.
Yeah. So,
it is what it is. There's other big fish in there now.
But we've got
other good ones.
Yeah, we've got a few weeks booked there. So that should be quite a good watch.
Well,
it will be.
5 nighters,
I need to get confirmation from you on this. These are the dates I've put in.
They are 5.
Yeah.
They're either 4 or 5 nights.
Yeah. Can you confirm that for us? Like when you get a chance. Just we'll work it out. So we've got plenty coming up, and we'll see you in July. Thank you for all your questions. I'll let you finish.
No, thank you very much. Really good to answer your questions, and hopefully we'll see you again next month.